Welcome to Your County on Community 7 Television. I'm Veis, and I'm your host. Each month we look at a different aspect of what's going on in Yellowstone County. The weather's getting a little bit colder. It's getting a little bit crisp in the morning. That can only mean one thing. It's election time. And so we have Bret Rutherford with us. Bret is with Yellowstone County Election Department. Bret, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me again. I always look forward to it.
All right. Well, turns out you guys have had a pretty slow year this year.
Yeah, that's putting it kind of mildly. We've had quite a few elections, one on top of each other.
No, that's not true at all. You guys have had one election after another. Let's go back to the very beginning, which I think was a school board election. Was your first election of the year? Is that right?
It should have been our first election of the year. On the calendar anyhow, but it was right when the COVID-19 thing hit. And we actually talked with the county superintendent of schools, looked at our processes, and we determined at that point this is not a viable situation. So Sherry canceled the school elections for us, and since then we've redone the School District 2 election and a couple of the smaller outlying area elections as well. So it was a good call. We really had no idea what COVID-19 meant at the time. We were on total lockdown at the time, so it was the right move. And then we jumped right into the primary.
Okay, all right. So your next election was the primary. Let me see if I can get these in the right order. Your next election was then the primary, the school district levy, the city levy, and then you have an upcoming general election. Is that the right order that you?
It is, and you can actually throw another school election in between the big Billings school election and then the city election. There were some outlying areas like Huntley and Lockwood and places like that had their little elections.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the school elections. My first question for you is, why does the Yellowstone County administer the election for School District 2?
So basically, we have the know-how. I mean, they're by far the largest district in the state, and in Montana, the school districts can opt to run their own elections, but you have to follow all the rules. You've got to check all the signatures on the absentee ballots, and they've just contracted with us to do it forever and ever, and even when it was polling place elections. We have the know-how and the expertise to do it, so they've done it with us for quite some time, and then we basically just bill them back for whatever cost it is, besides my salary and basically capital equipment that we own, like our tabulators and our ADA equipment. I don't charge them for that.
Okay. And so what were some of the things that were on the school elections that you had this year?
So basically, the ones that we did have, it was pretty much just levies. There's a nice law in Montana statute, so if Shoots files for single-member District 1 in Billings and nobody else files, we just cancel it outright to save the money for the district. So it was pretty much all levies this year for all the schools around. There was a couple minor small school district trustee races, but nothing in Billings.
Okay. Now what about the levy election? What was on the levy election this year? What was kind of people were looking at for the school election?
So it was just a general fund levy for Billings, basically, for the elementary district. They did the high school district last year. So it would just go basically into the general fund going into next tax season. So people will start seeing that next year on their tax rolls.
Okay. And so we talked you touched on this a little bit. I don't know that everyone quite understands this, but Billings Public Schools has an elementary school district and a high school district. Those have different geographic boundaries, which would mean tell me if I'm right or wrong, which would mean they have different voters depending upon if it's voting for the high school or voting for the elementary.
Yes. So if it's the high school district, the entire elementary district is included in that. But if you're in the high school district, that includes some sub-school districts like Elder Grove, Canyon Creek. They're standalone elementary districts that run their own elections. So that's really the difference. It's like there's the elementary bubble and then a bigger bubble that kind of eats up the high school areas.
Okay. And so then I'm sure part of the reason they like to come to you to do that is because somehow you have segregated those voters out. How do you know, well, Shoots can vote in the high school, but he can't vote in the. How do you know when I'm supposed to get a ballot?
In simplest of terms, in our voter database, I look up Shoots' address and it tells me he's in high school district 2, but he's in Canyon Creek Elementary District and not the Billings Elementary District. So it's all programmed it's tied into your address, basically.
Okay. So were those school elections, were those mail-in, in-person voting? Which way do you vote in those elections?
If we run them for the schools, which is basically all of our districts now, we have everybody on board, they're all mail ballot. They're free to do them themselves, and they would be polling place elections if they wanted them to. But even if you opt that way, you're still obliged to send an absentee ballot to anybody on the absentee list. And in our county, that's 85 to 90% of the voters anyhow. So everybody's pretty much just agreed to go all mail ballot anyways.
All right. Now, I know we have mostly all mail ballot, but on those occasions, if I want to vote in person, do I have that option even though it's an all-mail election, do I have that option to vote in person if I wanted to?
Well, sure, that's kind of a great point, and it's kind of nuanced. You could always bring your ballot down to the election office. We have a booth. We have a couple booths in our office. We have one right now just for social distancing, but you could always sit down and vote what we sent you and turn it in. You'd never see some election judges at a table with a paper register like you'd normally see at a polling place election. So if you even lost your ballot and need it replaced, we reissue another absentee packet. It's not a traditional ballot. So it's kind of a yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do always have the option to just come down to the office and kind of vote again. What if I voted on my ballot and I'm like, you know what, that's not what I wanted to do. Do I need to bring that in with me, or how would that work?
So if you make an actual mistake, which is more likely in, say, a big presidential, because there's so many things on the ballot, we don't want you to use whiteout or write us a love letter saying, no, I actually meant this. You should ask for a new ballot. And you can either do that with a form we have on our website. You can mail it in to us. You could fill it out, scan it, email it to me, or you could physically come down to the office. Or in the case of the big federal election coming up, we're moving the office to the Metro, so you can get a replacement in person or through the mail.
Okay. What did you see? I know we had the kind of the COVID protocols going on. What did you see as far as turnout goes and that type of thing for the school elections? Were they about on par with where they were before?
They are. Roughly now we see between 40 and 50% turnouts for city, school elections. And we've seen that this year. The numbers, the overall numbers are up, but we're in a presidential year, so registration numbers are up. But percentage-wise, it's been on par for what we've seen the last 5, 6, 7 years.
Okay. I'm assuming people are kind of used to the mail ballots at this point, and if we're looking at 85-90% people on the mail ballots, I suppose it doesn't throw a huge hiccup into what you're doing for those type of elections.
It doesn't, and you're right. Most people are just plain used to it. Now, there is that small amount, maybe 5 to 6, 7%, they prefer to vote at the polls. And that's fine, but we're not going to make everybody happy all the time. I learned that fairly early on. But then again, I'd say, if you want the traditional feeling, always you can come to our office, sit down in the booth, fill out your mail ballot, and we'll give you an I voted sticker.
Sure.
To fulfill that kind of end of it for people if they like it. Or we have drop sites. In the primary election, we had a couple drop sites. In the big one coming up, we're probably going to have, they're not all shored up, but we should have 12 or 13 drop sites for voters to use on election day.
Okay, let's move on to the city of Billings. The city also had a public safety mill levy that was on the ballot. I'm going to ask you the same question again, and I'm assuming I'm going to get the same answer. Why does the city of Billings use Yellowstone County election for their elections?
They're required to.
Oh, okay.
The only exemption in Montana is the schools can run their own elections. It's kind of a weird little thing that they're allowed to in Title 20 in Montana law. Everybody else falls under Title 13 election laws. So anything from a mosquito district, which those actually exist, all the way up to the president is run by the county elections office. Okay. Schools are exempt for whatever reason, and the historical reason I'm not sure of. Sure. Maybe it was because maybe some of the rural counties, they just didn't have the resources in the clerk and recorder's office to do the school elections along with everything else.
Sure. And maybe some of those school districts are so small that there's 20 registered voters to begin with, right?
Sure. We got some counties with just a couple hundred people. So
right. Exactly. So again, now with the city election, how do you determine who's eligible to vote for that? Again,
in the voter registration system, we have everything mapped out. So it's basically an address library that says it's the city of Billings on First Avenue out till the 3000 block. At 4001, they're rural, so they don't get a ballot. Okay. So you're basically in an incorporated area, or you're tagged as a rural voter.
Okay. Now, when the city changes their boundaries, do they have to send that information to you? Hey, we annexed this subdivision. They're now within the city limits.
Yeah, I actually get a notification from them, but usually when the city's annexing anything, it's empty, vacant land that's going to be developed. Once in a while, there'll be something where a building is on it, a residential address, and they do the same thing. I rely on our GIS department to notify us, and they're really good about that. So they'll say, hey, these 5 houses on First Street are now inside of the city of Billings. They're in Ward 5. Please put them in there. So that's kind of how it works. It's we just update as constant as we can.
So now let's talk about the city also a mail-in ballot election, all the things that we talked about there. Walk us through the process of counting those ballots when they come in. How does that work, and what does your office go through to count up all those ballots?
So first and foremost, most people, they'll notice when you get your mail ballot packet for the big one, you're going to have a barcode on there. And that's for you solely. So that packet should have one barcode. We scan it, and it'll pop up your voter record and basically your signature. So that's the first step, is we make sure the signature matches. Now, some people might have a couple signatures, or they've gotten older over the years, your handwriting deteriorates, something like that. If I need to, I can go into your second to last voter registration or your third to last. Some people have 7 or 8 actual signatures on file. So that's the first thing we do. So we verify your signature. We know Schutz voted the ballot. If there's no signature or it doesn't match, we actually send out a notice to the voter saying, hey, Schutz, you forgot to sign your affidavit. We can't take it because we don't even know if it came from you. It's just part of the security apparatus. Yeah. So, but if everything's good, we go into an auditing phase where we sort ballots into the precinct or city ward, and then there's an order that they go into, and we go back through and audit it and make sure everyone's checked in so Schutz gets credit for voting.
Sure.
And then after that, they kind of basically sit in limbo in the secrecy envelope up until 4 days before the election. We can start actually pulling the ballots out. We can't tabulate until the Monday before election day. So there's usually just these big piles of secrecy envelopes with ballots in them. So people always ask, well, it's not a secret ballot in an all-mail ballot election. We separate that signature from the inner stuff almost immediately. So in the end, your precinct, you just see a big pile of secrecy envelopes rather than Schutz's name right with your ballot.
So you can probably then check, okay, well, I checked in 100 ballots in this precinct, and I'm counting 100 ballots. Yeah. Is that kind of how you do a check on that?
Yeah, basically we kind of have a double audit system. You know, we scan the ballot to check your signature, then we go through an audit again to make sure you have the credit, and then it runs through the machine. I look in the voter registration system. We have 100 ballots in precinct 1. Did I run 100 ballots through the tabulator? And if it's 99, not 100, what happened in there? Maybe somebody sent us back a primary ballot during the city election, and that actually happened. So we have that stuff available during our canvas, so the numbers always equal out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good deal. A city election would turn out about what you expect for a city election.
Yep, again, mid 40%. It's great turnout for a city election. If this was 15 years ago at a polling place, it probably would have been 12 to 15%. Sure. So we do get a great uptick in participation when it is through the mail.
Okay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about the primary election, which you held also in June. Probably what most interests me about that is has not been in the past necessarily an all-mail election. Tell us how that changed, and then how did that process work for the primary election?
We've actually never run a federal election, primary or general, by mail ballot in Montana before. So basically, the governor's office had the governor has emergency authority. Sure. So there's one little line in Montana statute that says mail ballots are available for all elections except for federal elections. And under the Emergency Powers Act, he can strike that one line out, and it opened the door for us to conduct it by all mail ballot. And again, looking back at that time, and even in the situation today, we recommended it, my association recommended it to the governor's office, and it was the right thing to do. You know, we just couldn't socially distance. You know, usually in our offices, when we're working on these bigger elections, we have people crammed in there to every conference room in the county courthouse,
sure,
trying to process everything. Or you have a lot of voters crammed in the pavilion at the Metro. You add in 6 feet apart or masks, which wasn't a part of the deal back in June. there would have been people out in the streets. And we didn't want that, and we didn't want people crammed into tight places together. So that's how it happened. There was a directive, and it was a local option, just like it is in the general election. So the county commissioners and the clerk and recorders or the election administrators made that call at the county level. The governor did not force us to run an all-mail ballot election, and I think that's kind of lost in some of the news out there.
Sure. Now, given that we're kind of so used to it now, did you notice any difference then with the primary, or was it kind of on par with what you would have expected?
You know, the biggest thing to me, it was, because we're already pretty much a vote by mail county,
right?
You know, especially in a primary. There's a lot of people that don't vote in primary elections that will in a general. So to me, at least, it wasn't the lack of the polls on election day. It was just trying to do everything 6 feet apart. I mean, I only have so much space at the courthouse.
Sure.
You know, so that was kind of the weird thing about it. The turnout was it was 10,000 higher though.
Yeah.
You know, and that's great. So we've never seen something into the 50,000s in Yellowstone County as far as the primary goes. So it was more the back end for me that it really stuck out to me. You know, for the voters, a lot of them, if they weren't mail ballot voters to begin with or absentee voters, that's probably weird for them.
Sure.
And not having the polls open.
Okay.
But
all right, so then let's move on to the big one that's coming up, the big federal general election. I believe the governor has said the same thing, that counties can choose. Is that correct? And what has Yellowstone County chosen?
Yes. They gave us a little more time to play with this time, and we jumped on it right away. Again, it was the easy choice. It was the right thing to do, given the resources we have, especially most of our polling places are schools. You know, you never even know if they're going to be available on election day, and we don't want to cram people in there with students as well. So we opted in immediately. And I think all but, I want to say 8 counties at this point are all mail ballot. The primary, the entire state did it. They all opted in, but a couple counties decided not to.
Okay.
So I do advise anybody watching this that doesn't live in Yellowstone County to contact their county election office to see what they're doing for the election.
So when we say that turns to all mail ballots, you know, for the school election, for the city election, those are all mail ballots. So if you're registered to vote, you're going to get a ballot. Now, when you get to a federal general election, if it's not all mail as it was before, that means that if I'm not signed up to vote by mail, you expect me to show up at the polling place, right? Is that
exactly? We're just not sending those people packets. You know, because again, we're at 80, 85, 87% absentee voters anyhow. They automatically would have got an all-mail ballot. Now that extra 13% to round it all out. So all active and the 4 provisional voters we have in the county are sent a packet. If you're inactive, you do not get sent a packet. If you just have never been registered, you do not get sent a packet. So you do need to register to vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're someone who's not, how do I get signed up to vote?
So basically, the easiest thing to do is go to our website and just download the voter registration application. You can also get it on the Secretary of State's website or Voting in Montana. That's run by the Collective Association of EAs in Montana. Make sure it's the voter registration application, not an absentee application, because there's some stuff on the registration application, like you have to provide a driver's license number or last 4 digits of social security number so we can verify that this person actually exists.
Sure.
The absentee application doesn't have that. That's meant for people that's already registered to vote. Hey, I'm going to be down in Arizona during the general. Please forward my ballot to such and such address in Tempe. That's really what that application's for. So the Montana voter registration application.
Okay. So I'm guessing, you know, Yellowstone County is going to be an all-mail ballot. We're used to doing that. Probably me as a voter, I'm not going to notice anything unless I'm that part of that 10% that likes to go to the polls. Am I right there?
Correct. You know, if you've been an absentee voter like almost everybody has, the only difference you're going to see is the postage is paid. So it's a little bonus for you. You don't have to put a stamp on anything this go around, and we're required to do that. That was part of the deal. And for the polling place people, they're going to get one anyhow, but we're going to have the drop sites. So if you need to, if you miss the post or you want to drop it off on election day, our office is open, the courthouse is open, or we'll have some places around the county to drop it off as well.
Okay. I know you're still working on some of that. Do you know a handful of the places where you're for sure going to have drop boxes?
So think of our traditional polling places as of right now, and this could be changing. I don't know when this is airing, you know, or multiple times. I know that Elder Grove is not available, and I know that Huntley Project School is not available.
Okay.
Everybody else is tentatively available, but again, if a school gets a case of COVID and they shut down for cleaning, we're not going to be there. So we'll try to keep the media posted, and we'll update our website as constantly as we can. So just keep an eye out. Or you can get your voting done early.
Yeah.
You know, that's the best thing. We're send them out on October 9th. Unless you really don't know what you're doing, I just fill it out and get it back to us, either through the Postal Service, or you can always drop it off at the Metro or at the county courthouse during the duration.
Okay. Yeah. So from our end, it's going to be kind of the same. Talk to us about from your end. I think it's going to be quite a bit different from what you're used to for a federal general election.
Yeah, the fact that we're doing it as all-mail ballot, that's one thing, but add in the social distancing. We're really pushing early voting this time, which starts on October 2nd, so people can come in before we even mail them out and get a ballot if they want to do that, if they're going to be gone or for whatever reason. We're actually moving our office for voting purposes out to the Montana Pavilion at Metro Park. So if you need to get a ballot, you have to go out to the Metro. If you can always drop your ballot off at our traditional office in the courthouse. We're not going to lock the doors and shut the lights off, but we can't issue any ballots at it. So that's an important thing for people to understand.
Okay. So if I do want to come down, I probably need to go down to Metro Park.
Yep.
What will be the procedure if I show up at Metro Park and say, hey, I didn't know this. I'm going to be out of town. I'm not going to have time to vote. I'd just like to get it done today. What's the procedure going to be?
So when people think of the Metro on election day traditionally, they think of the 150 election judges sitting at tables, checking people in, having them sign registers. It's actually more of a function of what you'd see at our office if you've ever voted early or by absentee in person at the office. We're working on the computer system, and we're giving you a packet that looks exactly like the mail ballot packet. It's not the big secrecy sleeve with a flat ballot, and there's a guy standing at a box like you'd normally see on election day. So in all intents and purposes, you are voting another mail ballot. You just happen to be standing in the office.
Okay.
So it's a good point to say that if you get your ballot on October 10th or shortly thereafter, and you say, I want to go vote a real ballot down at the Metro, we're just going to give you the same packet you just got anyhow.
Okay.
So again, feel free to bring it down and stand in a booth and fill it out there and get your I voted sticker. We're all for that.
Okay.
But if you get it in the mail, just use that ballot.
Now, what prevents me from getting my ballot in the mail and voting it, and then kind of holding on to it and going down to the vote at the Metro, and then coming home and throwing that ballot in the mail and woohoo, I got to vote twice. How are you going to stop me from voting twice?
So basically, that's the nice function of all mail ballots. It's all digital. You know, not the ballot's not, it's obviously a paper ballot, but we are into the files immediately. So if Schutz comes down to the Metro on, let's say, October 9th, the day we actually mail the ballots, and says he's leaving town, and you don't even need an excuse, you can just do it. We'll give you a ballot, it voids what's going out to you in the mail. So it gives you a new serial number and everything. The barcode corresponds to that packet. You go home and try to nefariously, on October 12th, vote the mail ballot that we sent you out and return it to vote twice. It's already flagged and canceled.
Okay.
So if we think somebody's doing this on purpose, we kick them up to the county attorney's office for prosecution, obviously.
Right.
So yeah, we're not going to let people vote twice.
Okay.
That's a weird function that you don't have in traditional polling place elections, because the judges at the polls have paper in front of them. So it'll just say, Schutz already voted, here, vote a provisional ballot. We just, by doing it all mail ballot, we overwrite the original, or vice versa.
Okay, all right. Now, what if in the meantime I happen to move? I'm probably going to need to come down to the Metro, right?
So the nice thing about the directive is we actually have our normal registration open until October 26th at 5 p.m. Okay. So you can still mail in a registration card up until basically a week before the election. I wouldn't recommend letting it get that close, but if you've moved and you're not sure what you have on file with us, go to the My Voter page on our website. And you could plug in your name, your date of birth. It'll say Schutz is registered at 123 First Street. And then you could say, oh, that's the old address. You know you have to re-register with us. So that's the best resource for people. And I would do it now.
Okay.
You know, the longer you wait, the more likely it might get hung up in the mail, and you're just kind of playing with fire the closer you get to election day.
Okay. What would be your recommendation for, I need to have my ballot in by what date, what time?
So as of right now, there's lawsuits. 8 o'clock on election day, we have to have physical possession of your ballot. So we recommend, and the post office does too, that's where we get this, is that you mail your ballot back at least a week before.
Okay.
Give them the time. Now, we're blessed to have a processing plant in Billings. Anybody out in the rural areas, your ballot comes to Billings and then gets shipped off to wherever it may need to go. So keep that in mind. So I'd give it the 7 days. Anything inside that, your best bet, Metro Park or the county courthouse in Yellowstone County. On election day, we'll have additional drop sites. Now, if you don't live in Yellowstone County, please check with your election administrator. If you live in Carbon, I can't take your ballot. It won't get counted if you drop it off somewhere in Yellowstone County.
Okay. So if it's a week before the election, I probably need to take the time to just come down to Metro and throw it in the box down there.
Yeah, yeah. We'll have some greeters out in front of the pavilion, right at the front doors, barring the weather might be nice. We might have some people out actually in the parking lot, but there'll be some judges available to actually take possession of your ballot. There won't be just a box unguarded for people just to throw stuff in.
Yeah. Anything else you want people to know about voting in this particular election, because it is a little bit different than I guess what they might be used to?
So really the biggest thing is your mail ballot is your real ballot. Vote that ballot. If you make a mistake, we're happy to replace it or something like that. You can't just have it in your hand on election day and, I'm just going to go to the traditional polling place in Custer and get a real ballot. They won't have them there. All you'll be able to do is drop your ballot off. So if you need a replacement, you need to do that before election day, or you're going to have to come down to the Metro to do it. So just do everything in advance. Okay. That's the best advice I can give. Don't think that election day is the only time to vote right now.
Yeah.
The military started voting on the 18th of September, and we've already gotten quite a few back. Early voting opens up at the Metro on October 2nd, so it runs for basically 30 days in person. And we're mailing everybody that's active a ballot on the 9th. Use all that time. There's no reason to wait.
Okay. All right. Any of the procedures that you have had to put in place here that you think, man, that's slick, I'll probably use that in the future, even 4 years from now, we're back to traditional polling place. That was slick, and I'm using that again.
Unfortunately, so much of it is statute driven. Unless the legislature changes some of our stuff, it's gonna default back to where we already were. Probably the biggest thing that's happened since the last session is Senator Webb from the Heights sponsored some legislation that we put forward to help us actually get ballots prepped early and start tabulating early. So we never wrote that thinking of a pandemic and sitting 6 feet apart. Yeah. So there's going to be a bit of a delay.
Okay.
And then there's the other thing of what do you do if somebody comes in at 7:59 on election night and licks an envelope in front of you? Yeah. You might want to let it sit overnight. So we're looking at all of those things. But I think the actual early prep and tabulation has helped us out tremendously. And moving forward, we'll continue to use that as much as possible.
What percentage of the ballots will you have counted probably by, you can start counting a couple days beforehand, is that right?
We can remove your ballot from its envelope, lock it up, starting the Thursday before Election Day. We can't start counting until the day before Election Day.
Okay.
But, if all goes well, we usually can probably have almost everything that was in-house by Friday before tabulated by 8 o'clock on Election Day.
Okay.
But we'll have a higher turnout for this election, and actually about half the voters in the county are going to have 2 sheets. The other half will have 1 sheet.
Yeah.
So that you're just doubling, a third more paper basically that you have to take care of. And what will really count is, are we going to see people dropping off on Election Day? Yeah. Or are they going to drop it off early? If it's in-house, we can get things ready to go and run with it. If Schutz drops his ballot off at 7:55 on election night, we have to check the signature. Yeah. We have to audit it.
Yeah.
We have to slice that Eller envelope, pull out the secrecy, stick it with the other ones from the precinct, finish that up, then go back to those envelopes, open them again, and then unfold the ballots. It actually takes quite a bit of time. And I was shocked in the primary how many people actually walked in on Election Day. Because we had such a great returns from the get-go of the mailing day, and it just kind of tailed off like this.
Right, yeah.
And then there was a spike on Election Day. So hopefully people take heed and try to get it done early.
Okay.
That would make things a lot smoother. But I don't expect all the results to be done like at 8:05, 8:30 on election night. That's just not realistic in a presidential.
Sure.
Yeah.
But probably, are you kind of thinking maybe sometime that day or the next day you'll be tabulated?
Yeah, we should, unless there's a lawsuit out there right now that's looking at the postmark time. So earlier I said you have to have your ballot in at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
That might change in the courts.
Okay.
So if it's postmarked on election day, and the way I understand it now is they're looking at the following Monday.
Oh, okay.
So we're receiving mail every day and adding to those numbers. So it could drag for a week. But all things being equal now, we should be done Wednesday, and then any provisional ballots, i.e. you move from county to county, those don't get counted until the following Monday anyhow.
Okay.
So at 4 or 5 o'clock the following Monday, we add on top of the results.
Okay.
So this whole thing about having results done on election night, that's never been that way. It just might get drawn out a little bit more.
All right, Bret, thanks for coming on with us. We really appreciate it. This was very informative. We appreciate your time, and we appreciate all that you and your office does to have elections here in Yellowstone County. Thank you.
Thank you so much.